Part 36. My time is running out. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 351. Jenna's indifferent face noticed some changes at this moment, and she frowned slightly. She hesitated, but thought of Chen Tao's importance. Jenna didn't hesitate for long, she said, "Okay." Chen Tao looked at Jenna and said, "So now you agree, and with your consent, I touched your face. Then do you think we have violated the laws of the sanctuary? Then should we be sentenced to death?" Jenna looked at Chen Tao. "This is different. You are from outside the territory, and the reason why I agree with you to do this is also for the holy territory." Chen Tao crossed his arms across his chest, looked at Jenna, and said, "Since you can do these things for the holy domain, then you can let the two of them go for the holy domain, right?" Jenna was startled. She frowned, and said, "This is impossible. The two of them have violated the laws of the sanctuary and cannot be forgiven." Chen Tao said, "Is it unforgivable? The relationship between the two of them cannot be determined yet. As you just said, he just touched the girl's hair, which is nothing at all. I hope they are okay. If you force them to do something, I will feel very bad. Maybe I will change my mind and not help you build mechas." Having said this, Chen Tao paused slightly. He looked at Jenna and said, "Do you think it's appropriate to give up the mechas I can produce in order to punish them?" Jenna's eyebrows wrinkled slightly, and she looked at the man who had already stood up and the girl. Jenna frowned. She looked at Chen Tao and said, "Okay, for your sake, let's forget about it." "Thank you, Mr. Chen." And Captain Jenna Nina hurriedly spoke out. Jenna frowned, crossed her arms over her chest, and said, "Go down." Nina nodded and left with the man. Jenna glanced around and said, "What are you looking at? Don't you have to work?" Her tone was very calm, without any emotion. But when the onlookers heard this, they dispersed one by one, for fear of being stared at by Jenna. Looking at the people scattering, Jenna's eyes fell on Chen Tao. She said, "I came here this time to find you. Since you showed up, it's just right." Chen Tao was slightly startled. "Come to see me?" Jenna said, "Yes, I have a question to ask you." Chen Tao said, "What's the problem?" Zhen Na looked at Chen Tao and said, "What type of mecha are you producing? Our law enforcement team also needs new mechas. I hope you can produce a batch of mechas suitable for our law enforcement team." Hearing this, Chen Tao blinked. He looked at the two warriors wearing light mechas and holding equipment standing behind Jenna. He looked at Jenna and said, "Isn't this necessary?" "Why is it not necessary?" Jenna looked at Chen Tao. "Are you planning to only make mechas for the people in the resource group, and not for our law enforcement group?" Chen Tao said, "Well, that is indeed my plan. The people in the resource group need to go outside and face the thunder beasts and the special beasts. They need harder mechas. And your law enforcement group only needs stay in the city, protect the laws of the sanctuary, enforce the regulations, and face the general public most of the time. I think you won't need two high-end mechas," Chen Tao said. Jenna's eyebrows suddenly furrowed. "It's really superficial. Do you think our law enforcement team doesn't need powerful mechas? What our law enforcement team does is to maintain the stability of the sanctuary. This task is more important than the resource team, much more important." She looked at Chen Tao and said, "The resource group's mecha combat power needs to be improved, and so do we." Chen Tao said, "If we just maintain the stability in the sanctuary, I think the mechas you have now are enough for you." Jenna frowned and said, "You just don't want to build mechas for my law enforcement team." Chen Tao said, "You can say that." Jenna frowned and looked directly into Chen Tao's eyes. Her eyes filled with anger. "In this case, let's wait and see, don't fall into my hands." After saying that, Jenna turned and left, saying, "Let's go." She left with the people. Looking at Jenna's enchanting back. Thinking of Jenna's harsh words, Chen Tao couldn't help but smile. It's a pity that Jenna's idea will not be useful. Not to mention that the technology mastered by Chen Tao is several levels better than the technology of Sanctuary. Even if he takes 10 million steps back, it is said that Leslie is not satisfied with Chen Tao's technology. And Chen Tao also broke the law and fell into Jenna's hands. What could Jenna do to him? Jenna obviously didn't know how powerful Chen Tao was. Of course, there is no need for Chen Tao to mention this to Jenna now. Early the next morning, Chen Tao and Pei Ai were sitting on an off-road vehicle. Pei Ai drove the off-road vehicle to the top of the wall, then used the lift on the wall to fall and landed outside the wall. The off-road vehicle used the lift platform. As off-road vehicles came down from the lift one after another, a fleet of 11 off-road vehicles slowly formed, each carrying 2 heavy-duty mechas. 11 off-road vehicles headed towards the orchard in an orderly manner. Previously, the Vanguard team discovered through reconnaissance that there are thunder beasts and special beasts in the orchard. Dimanche's voice sounded on the intercom of the off-road vehicle. Dimanche said, "Our main task this time is to eliminate all the thunder beasts and special beasts entrenched in the orchard, and at the same time, we must open the way for the collection team behind us. When we arrive at the destination, I will open the safety barrier. After that, you two will form a team and drive the mecha according to the route we arranged earlier. Spread out in a fan shape and eliminate the thunder beasts and special beasts. Do you understand?" Dimanche's voice was serious. "Yes." A unanimous response sounded in the intercom. Pei Ai beside Chen Tao also responded, "Yes." Pei Ai looked ahead, and she subconsciously looked at Chen Tao beside her through the car mirror. She said, "Your giant humanoid mecha, won't you come with us?" Hearing this, Chen Tao's eyebrows stretched slightly, he smiled and said, "There is no need for this." Pei Ai's eyes were shining, and she retracted her gaze and looked forward. "This mission is very important. If it fails, the sanctuary will become a purgatory on Earth." She looked serious. Hearing this, Chen Tao nodded slightly and said, "I know. Be careful. The Ratmen are coming suddenly." Dimanche's serious and solemn voice sounded. "Ratmen?" Chen Tao raised his head and saw that a group of Ratmen were coming towards him not far away. "Damn it," Dimanche's voice was full of annoyance. "Slow down, teams 1, 2, and 3 drive the mechas and clear the way." "Yes. My time is running out." Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 352. What came face to face was the Lyta herd, those dark beasts that looked like leopards. There is a group of light beasts running this way, carrying dust with them. 3 off-road vehicles separated from the convoy and stopped. Other off-road vehicles deliberately slowed down to avoid colliding with the lightmen before they were on the road. After the 3 off-road vehicles stopped, the people in the vehicles immediately got into the heavy humanoid mecha. 6 people sat up. 6 heavy mechas got off the off-road vehicle, and 4 wheels appeared under the heavy mechas. They drove the heavy mechas and quickly caught up with the convoy. 6 warriors driving heavy mechas led the way. They picked up the heavy weapons in the hands of the humanoid mecha and approached the Lyta herd. Bang bang bang. 6 heavy-duty Gatlings bombarded the Lyta herd like a violent storm. Roar. Ouch. The Lyta herd kept screaming. Chen Tao could hear the gunfire from the heavy weapons launch station, which was very loud. The sound of gunshots mixed with lightmen's screams. Very noisy. Seeing the Lyta herd getting closer and closer, the 6 humanoid mechas retracted their Gatling guns and then drew the broadswords on their backs. 4 of them pounced on the oncoming herd. The other 2 guarded both sides of the convoy. The division of labor is clear. After the 4 warriors driving humanoid mechas pounced into the herd of lighter beasts, they were like wolves entering the herd of sheep. Crazy massacre. He abruptly opened a path for the convoy. The convoy flew along the road paved with the bodies of lightmen. Chen Tao looked back at the light beast herd. It was a small beast herd. After being rushed by 6 humanoid mechas, the small beast herd dispersed. Now I saw that there were only 4 or 5 beasts left in this small herd. Realizing the danger, the remaining 4 or 5 thunder beasts ran away. Seeing this, Chen Tao's eyebrows stretched slightly. He took back time, folded his hands around his chest, and looked ahead. The 6 heavy mechas were divided into 2 teams and followed the convoy, as if they were covering the movement of the convoy. Fortunately, there are no strange beasts that we encountered before in this herd. Pei Ai's voice came from beside him. Hearing this voice, Chen Tao looked at Pei Ai. Pei Ai's face turned slightly pale and she seemed a little nervous. Chen Tao smiled and said, "Don't worry, I'm here." Pei Ai was slightly startled, her heart warmed, and she felt inexplicably happy. Chen Tao said, "By the way, why doesn't your captain let you drive the mecha directly to the orchard? Wouldn't that be simpler?" When Pei Ai heard this, she said, "Mechas consume too much energy, and many resources in the sanctuary are in short supply, including energy. If you use mechas casually now, it won't be long before the sanctuary will have no energy to use. A mecha without energy to support it is just scrap metal. So that's it? No wonder Pei Ai and the others used to have mechas, but they never used them. Instead, they took a car." Chen Tao said, "What energy do you use?" Pei Ai said, "Currently we use electricity." Electricity? It is indeed difficult to use electric energy to maintain a heavy mecha that is comparable to a tank. Pei Ai seemed to remember something. She subconsciously turned her face to look at Chen Tao and said, "What energy does your mecha use?" Chen Tao smiled and said, "I use stellar energy." Stellar energy? Pei Ai withdrew her gaze and looked forward. She said, "I haven't heard of this kind of energy." Chen Tao said, "Stellar energy is a very complicated thing. The simplest understanding is the energy obtained from stars." Then, "How long can the mecha you gave me last using that kind of energy?" Pei Ai didn't quite understand what stellar energy was, so she was more concerned about this. Using this question, she could judge how different this energy was from the energy they used. Chen Tao folded his hands on his chest, leaned back on his chair, and said, "As long as your star does not die, it can run infinitely." Pei Ai's pupils condensed slightly, and there was a hint of surprise in her eyes. "Is this, really or not?" Chen Tao said, "Of course it's true, I don't need to lie to you." Pei Ai's eyelashes trembled slightly, her eyebrows were slightly solemn, and her expression became solemn and serious for a few minutes. "If this is the case, if the sanctuary uses the stellar energy you mentioned for various weapons, then..." Chen Tao said, "Maybe, but I will not tell the Holy Land how to use stellar energy." Pei Ai's eyes gained a hint of luster, she pursed her thin lips and said nothing. "There is an orchard ahead. See the orchard? Everyone, stop outside the orchard and act according to our original plan." Dimanche's voice sounded. "Hear this sound?" Yes. All off-road vehicles stopped. Everyone got off the off-road vehicle and entered the heavy mecha that looked like a humanoid tank. Chen Tao also got out of the car, except for him and Pei Ai. Pei Ai looked at the F1 mecha in the car and silently recited the name of the F1 mecha in his mind. The F1 mecha in the car quickly decomposed. Bang bang, one by one, all the parts were assembled on Pei Ai's body. Pei Ai put on the F1 mecha. She turned slightly sideways and looked at Chen Tao. But he found that Chen Tao had no intention of putting on the mecha. Seeing this, Pei Ai said, "Where is your mecha?" "Mine." Chen Tao thought for a moment. "It's true that if you don't wear the mecha now, it will be a bit too conspicuous." "Okay." Chen Tao raised his hand. In the distance, the dark mecha parts flew over from an unknown place. Covering Chen Tao's body was also wrapped in a humanoid mecha. This is a dark, non-reflective light humanoid mecha, which is somewhat similar to what Pei Ai is wearing at the moment, but the difference is that this one is a male mecha. This mecha is quite unique, a voice came. Hearing this voice, Chen Tao looked in one direction. Over there was Dimanche driving the mecha. Dimanche smiled playfully and said, "My mecha looks very bulky, and your mecha looks very light. I have some doubts. Can your thin mecha really withstand the attacks of those special beasts?" Chen Tao said, "You will know when you see it." As soon as the words fell, flames spurted out from behind Chen Tao, and he flew into the air. Seeing this, Dimanche's eyes lit up slightly. "Can you still fly?" Pei raised his face and looked at Chen Tao in the sky. Huh! Flames also spurted out from behind Pei, and she flew to Chen Tao with the propulsion of the flames. Pei looked at Dimanche below, and then looked at Chen Tao. "What is this?" Chen Tao said, "Micro-aircraft, let's go, finish the task as soon as possible, and go back as soon as possible." Okay, Pei nodded slightly. When Dimanche saw this, her eyes shone with a glimmer, and she watched Chen Tao and Pei leave together. Seeing this, Dimanche said, "This new type of mecha is very special." Okay. She looked at the soldiers around her and said, "Let's set off according to the original plan." Yes. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. My time is running out. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 353. A translucent light mask lit up in the fruit forest, enveloping the entire fruit forest in the light mask. Seeing this mask, Chen Tao's eyebrows stretched slightly. Pei said, "It should be Captain Dimanche who opened the defensive barrier. In this way, the thunder beasts outside can't enter for the time being. We must clear the thunder beasts in the barrier within a period of time, and then let the picking team come in and collect resources." Chen Tao looked away and didn't bother to think about it. Pei and Chen Tao followed the route arranged by Dimanche. Suddenly, Pei slowly stopped flying. Noticing that Pei stopped, Chen Tao also stopped. He looked at Pei, who was looking down. Chen Tao looked in the direction Pei was looking at. In the fruit forest below, you can see a dozen thunder beasts foraging for food under the fruit forest. Several of the thunder beasts noticed this. They looked up at Chen Tao and roared. Roar! Other thunder beasts also noticed this side, and a dozen or so thunder beasts raised their heads and looked at this side. Chen Tao crossed his arms across his chest. He looked away, looked at Pei, and said, "Come and try the strength of this mecha." When Pei heard this, she nodded slightly. Although this is a mecha that Pei has never used before, in any case, Pei has also piloted other mechas, so he naturally has some experience. Pei raised her hand, and a blue light glowed on her palm. The light condensed and turned into a lightsaber. As soon as the lightsaber was formed, Pei controlled the thruster and jumped into the herd of lightmen. The lightsaber in his hand waved. The originally extremely hard lightman was like paper with the lightsaber, and was easily cut into two pieces. Pei's eyes lit up slightly, and he thought to himself, "What a powerful weapon." Roar! The moment Pei felt the power of the weapon and was a little surprised, a thunder beast approached and bit Pei's shoulder with a bloody mouth. Sure, Pei secretly thought, but she couldn't react in time, and the light beast's mouth bit Pei's shoulder. The moment it bit, the mecha lit up with a burst of blue light. Lightman's teeth were blocked from the blue light. Pei's eyes brightened slightly, she broke away from the thunder beast's bloody mouth, and with a twist of the lightsaber in her hand, the thunder beast split into two. So relaxing. Pei has never felt that killing a thunder beast would be so easy. The mecha is so light that you can't even feel the slightest weight when wearing it. The lightsaber is also very light, almost the same. The power generated by the attacks of the thunder beasts is blocked by the mecha and cannot cause any harm to Pei. Influence. As long as Pei waved his hand, A thunder beast was split into two. This is simply a one-sided massacre. Probably less than 10 minutes. The dozen or so thunder beasts all fell to the ground, motionless. Pei looked at his body and found that there was no blood on the mecha he was wearing. "How do you feel?" Chen Tao's voice came from beside him. Pei was slightly startled. She looked at Chen Tao and said, "It feels so magical. This mecha is so powerful. These thunder beasts are no match for this mecha." There was surprise in her voice. Hearing this, Chen Tao crossed his chest with his hands and said with a smile, "This mecha has many functions. Your lightsaber weapon is just one of the weapons it has. If you study more in the future, you will have many surprises." "Okay," Pei responded. Chen Tao said, "Let's go, let's finish this task, then go home for lunch and do something we love." Pei's face turned slightly red. "Yeah." The two flew into the sky and continued flying along the route. Their mission this time was to clear out all the Thundermons seen along the planned route. For Pei, who has a new type of mecha, this is an easy task. After clearing out more than 30 lighter beasts along the way, we finally reached the finish line. Pei said, "Let's go back the same way and see if there is anything we missed." "Ah! Help!" Suddenly, the intercom rang with screams and calls for help. "I'm in the third team, damn, it's a special beast, it's a special." A panicked voice sounded on the intercom, but it continued for a long time before the sound disappeared. "Team 3? Team 3, Dimanche's voice sounded. But the third team obviously still didn't respond. Pei's expression changed slightly, and she bit her lower lip. It seems that the special beast last time was not the last one. Something happened to the third team. Pei connected to the intercom and said, "Captain, the thunder beasts on the roadside here have been cleared away. I suggest that I go to support the third team. I have a new type of mecha, and there is nothing I can do about those special beasts." "Okay." Dimanche's voice was solemn as she said, "Pay attention to safety." "Yes," Pei responded. Pei looked at Chen Tao, as if he wanted to ask Chen Tao's opinion. Chen Tao smiled and said, "Do as you wish. I'm just here to watch this mission and I won't interfere." Pei said, "Yeah." She flew the mecha in the direction of the third team. With the ability of a mecha to fly, it's very fast. "This is the marching route of the third team," Pei said. Pei looked down and frowned. "The fruit trees here are too lush. Looking down from above, you can see the green canopy, but nothing else can be seen." Pei flew into the orchard. "Stand properly when you land." Pei's pupils condensed slightly. Chen Tao landed beside Pei. He noticed that Pei was motionless. He looked in the direction Pei was looking. Two heavy mechas were lying on the ground in front. The mecha cabin was not opened, but there was a hole in the abdomen of the mecha, and blood was pouring out of the hole. Chen Tao walked over, squatted down, glanced, stood up, looked at Pei, and said, "No more." Pei bit his lower lip and said to the intercom, "Captain, we have arrived at the location where the third team had an accident. Both of them have died. At the scene, we can see two heavy mechas with sharp weapons piercing their abdomens. I guess it should be the special beast I encountered last time." Dimanche said, "I understand, you have to be careful, the special beast is likely nearby." "Yes," Pei responded. Suddenly, a black shadow shot out from the shadow of the fruit tree and shot towards Pei. Pei caught the outline of the shadow, and at a glance, Pei saw that it was a dark tail. Although he caught it, at this moment, Pei couldn't react at all. "It's over." Pei's face was pale. The tail stabbed Pei's abdomen. Suddenly, Pei's abdominal mecha lit up with a blue light shield. Bang! The tail collided with the light shield. Pei didn't move, and the tail was bounced away by the recoil and flew back. Pei was slightly startled. She looked at the light shield that was slowly dispersing on her abdomen, and there was joy in her eyes. It seems that Chen Tao did not lie to her. What's going on? When Dimansha heard the movement from Pei Ai through the intercom, her tone immediately became solemn. Pei Ai said, I was attacked by a special beast, and it was Chen Tao's new mecha that saved me. Captain, I'm fine. Next, I want to avenge the third team. My time is running out. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 354. Are you sure? Dimansa's voice was serious and dignified. Pei Ai looked at the strange beast in front of her and said, driving Chen Tao's mecha, I feel like I can do anything now. Okay, Dimansha said, all teams will continue to perform their tasks, and the task of the third team will be handed over to Pei Ai's team. Yes. Pei Ai turned off the intercom and looked ahead. The special beast has come out of the shadows. It is a beast with the same size as a lioness. What is different from the lioness is that it is completely black and has a long tail behind it. It is currently 10 meters long. It was baring its teeth, revealing its terrifying fangs. Seeing this, Pei Ai raised his hand, and there was a lightsaber on the palm of the mecha. The special beast was ready to attack and pounced on Pei Ai. The moment it approached, the special beast attacked Pei Ai with its tail. Pei Ai waved the lightsaber in his hand. Chiang. The tip of its tail collided with the lightsaber, and the strange beast's tail was bounced away. At this time, the two were very close, only 1 meter away. The strange beast took the opportunity to pounce on Pei Ai's throat, biting Pei Ai's throat with a bloody mouth. Seeing the strange beast swooping over, Pei Ai panicked and stepped back. The strange beast pounced on 2 of them. Pei Ai was thrown to the ground in response. The strange beast bit Pei Ai's throat directly. Pei Ai panicked and quickly put his arms across his body. The monster's bloody mouth bit Pei Ai's arm, and at this moment, the monster's tail took the opportunity to stab Pei Ai's head. The armor on the head lit up with a blue barrier, and the tail was bounced away as soon as it came close. The special beast bit Pei Ai's forearm crazily, trying to bite Pei Ai's forearm and the mecha into pieces. At this time, the mecha on Pei Ai's forearm also glowed with blue light. No matter how hard the special beast tried, it couldn't bite through the mecha. Seeing this scene, Pei Ai regained consciousness. She realized that she could move her right hand. She raised her hand, and the lightsaber shrank and turned into a short sword. Pei Ai stabbed directly into the head of the special beast. Ouch! The strange beast let out a scream. It wanted to break away from Pei Ai, but Pei Ai lifted the broken sword upwards. Half of the head of the strange beast was cut off. The blue pupils of the special beast turned grey, and it fell down to the ground. Pei Ai struggled for a while, pushed the strange beast away, and stood up. She looked at her forearm that had just been bitten and found that there was no trace of the mecha on it. Pei Ai turned on the intercom while checking his body. Captain, there seems to be only one special beast here that I have dealt with. Very good. Dimansha's voice sounded, her voice more relaxed. It seems that Chen Tao's mecha is really capable. Pei Ai said, yes, the tail attack of that special beast can easily destroy our heavy mecha. But I forced myself to eat its tail attack several times, and there was no trace on the mecha at all. Well, then you can continue to perform the mission of the third team. Timanza's voice came. Yes, Pei Ai responded. Pei Ai hung up the intercom and looked at Chen Tao subconsciously. She couldn't see Chen Tao's face through the helmet. But there was warmth in Pei's heart, and she said, thank you. Hearing this, Chen Tao smiled and said, thank you for what? Pei Ai said, if it weren't for the mecha you gave me, I would be dead now, let alone avenge my companions. Chen Tao said, I want to thank you. When the mission is over, I will have time to thank you. You should know what kind of thank you gift I like. Pei Ai in the mecha blushed and said, I understand, let's go. She flew low and flew forward. Looking at Pei Ai's back, Chen Tao smiled. Although he couldn't see Pei Ai's face, he could see through Pei Ai's tone. Chen Tao could completely imagine her blushing. Chen Tao followed Pei Ai. The route taken by the third team obviously had many more thunder beasts than the previous route taken by Chen Tao and Pei Ai. However, facing Pei Ai, who had an F1 mecha, those light beasts were like ants, killed and crushed in one fell swoop. At this time it didn't go so smoothly. The intercom rang out halfway. Damn it! Captain, Zi died. It's a special beast, the kind of special beast Pei Ai mentioned before. Zi Lei. Pei Ai's face changed slightly. That's where the 4 teams are. I have one here too. Dimanche's voice sounded, her voice trembling slightly. I have some here too. Another voice came. When Timensa heard this voice, she immediately said, everyone withdraw immediately. Yes. Yes. I heard Timanza's panicked voice. Pei Ai frowned, she quickly adjusted her direction, and then said to Chen Tao, let's go meet the team leader. At the same time, Dimantha's location. Dimantha piloted the heavy humanoid mecha and quickly retreated. Behind Dimantha, 3 special beasts with 10-meter long tails fiercely chased Dimantha. Dimantha looked back. Suddenly, one of the special beasts approached, and its long tail stabbed Dimantha's mecha. Timanza drove the mecha and turned sideways, tilting her sword. Bang! Timanza was thrown away by a huge force. His body hit the tree trunk next to him heavily. The whole body of Dimantha in the mecha trembled, and the fruit tree, which was as thick as the arms of 5 adults, trembled instantly. Clatter! With a slight sound, apples fell from the tree one by one. At this moment, the 3 special beasts had come over and surrounded Dimantha in the middle. Dimantha recovered, looked at the 3 special beasts slowly approaching through the mecha helmet, and hurriedly struggled to drive the mecha to stand up. In front of her, the 3 special beasts were raising their long tails behind them, and the tips of the tails with a blue luster were facing Dimantha, ready to attack at any time. Dimantha's face was as pale as paper. It's over. This was Dimantha's inner thought at the moment. But as a warrior, facing this situation, Dimantha clenched the big knife in her hand that had been loosened, and pointed the blade at the 3 special beasts. Roar! One of the special beasts felt provoked, and it roared angrily, and stabbed Dimantha with its tail. Too fast. This sentence flashed through Dimantha's mind. The tail was already close at hand. It's over. Dimantha felt cold all over, and she had already smelled the breath of death. Dimantha almost subconsciously closed her eyes. After closing her eyes, the imagined pain did not come. Dimantha had doubts. She opened her eyes, and saw the back of a warrior wearing a mecha. Looking at this back, Dimantha's heart moved. Chen Tao, she recognized the man's back. Dimantha looked closely and found that Chen Tao was standing with his hands on his chest. And in front of Chen Tao there was a blue barrier, blocking all the enemy's attacks. Suddenly, another mecha warrior flew out, holding a lightsaber in his hand. With a sweep of the lightsaber, the 3 special beasts broke into 2 and fell to the ground. Dimantha's eyes trembled slightly. Is this the power of the mecha? My time is running out. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 355. After Pei Ai dealt with the 3 special beasts, he came to Dimantha and said, Captain, are you okay? Timensa said, I'm fine, it's just my companion. Her voice was filled with helplessness. Timanza said, you go to help other teams first. After the matter is settled, we will meet at the starting point. Yes, Pei Ai responded respectfully. Pei Ai flew away. Chen Tao looked at Pei Ai's back. He looked away and looked at Dimantha. Dimantha looked at Chen Tao, aren't you going to follow Pei Ai? Hearing this, Chen Tao said, I think there is no need for this. The mecha driven by AI can ensure that she can walk sideways in this fruit forest. As for you, are you okay? Taimanza drove the heavy mecha and began to retreat. As she retreated, she said, I'm fine, but the situation is very bad now. This time is different from before. The fighter lightman I met when I went out to look for resources was like special beasts are rare, and such special beasts that can instantly shatter mechas are unprecedented. But this time, if we can't collect the food back, Demansa said, many people will definitely starve to death in the lower class area. If it is not handled well, it will even cause a big chaos. And even in the superior area, there's not enough food anymore. Taimanza frowned, the situation is very bad. Chen Tao withdrew his gaze and did not speak. Taimantha said, can you help us? Chen Tao crossed his arms and said, I'm not from the sanctuary, why should I help the sanctuary? Dimansha looked at Chen Tao beside her. Chen Tao was wearing a mecha. He was flying at low altitude and following her to the right. Because Chen Tao was wearing a helmet, Dimansha couldn't see Chen Tao's appearance. Dimansha looked away and said, we are all human beings, and the Holy Land is the only hope for mankind. If the Holy Land is gone, then mankind is not far from extinction. Chen Tao said, maybe, in this huge universe, this planet is not the only one with human existence. Are you talking about aliens? Do you believe there are aliens? Dimansha's voice was full of doubts. Chen Tao was silent for a while. Taimensa said, I don't dare you discuss unknown things like aliens. I only talk about the situation we are facing now. The civilization of this planet has not yet reached the level of aerospace civilization. They cannot leave this planet at all, and naturally they have no way to contact the world outside the planet. For them now, just like the Earth star where Chen Tao lived in the past, they think that only the Earth star in the entire universe has humans. This is understandable. Chen Tao said, what you said is the same as what your commander said. It means that mankind is a community with a shared future. As a member of mankind, let me help you, right? Taimanza was silent for a moment and said, I don't want to force you to do something you don't want to do, but the situation is very critical now. Is it a crisis? Chen Tao said, actually, you only need to wait a month until all my mechas are developed and I can install the new mechas for you. Then you can eradicate the strange beasts in the orchard at will. In 1 month, the people in the upper class area may be able to survive, but I'm afraid that by then, all the residents in the lower class area will be dead, Demansa said slowly. Chen Tao said, aren't the people in that place just like disposable objects to you? Wouldn't it be better for you if they starved to death? This made Chen Tao a little strange. The laws of the sanctuary are strict, and the lower zone is where a group of people with genetic defects stay. Those people are almost abandoned. What if we wait a month and let them starve to death? For Chen Tao, human life is the same regardless of whether the genes are superior or inferior. There is no equality in his heart. If people were replaced by people from the Earth star, perhaps the people from the Earth star would not give up those lives. But it is different in this world that has been brainwashed by the laws of the sanctuary. But this makes Chen Tao a little strange. Dimansha seems to be a little different. What are you talking about? Dimansha stopped, looked at Chen Tao, and said, superior people are human beings, and inferior people are human beings too. If my problems lead to their death, then I will suffer for the rest of my life. Taimanza looked away and said nothing. Her voice became colder and she seemed a little angry. Chen Tao looked at Dimansha, interesting. Taimanza doesn't seem to agree with the laws of the sanctuary. Chen Tao said, you don't agree with the laws of the sanctuary. Dimansha frowned her eyebrows, there's no point in agreeing or disagreeing. The laws of the sanctuary are for the survival of mankind. Chen Tao said, have you been to the Gene Exchange Center? Taimentha didn't speak. She didn't seem to answer the question. Chen Tao said, Do you agree with what the Gene Exchange Center has done? You are so rude, Demansa said with a hint of sullenness in her voice. No man would ask a woman such a question. So what if you don't approve? It's for the sake of humanity. It seems that she doesn't agree with it, and only acquiesces to these things for the sake of the fate of mankind. Interesting. Chen Tao stretched his eyebrows and said, I can help you with Quilin's matter. Chen Tao could choose to watch, but now Chen Tao has changed his mind. Timentha said, is that okay? Of course, but I have a condition, Chen Tao said. I knew you wouldn't help me so easily. Tell me, what are the conditions? Demantia said slowly. Chen Tao said, simple, just answer the question I just asked you. Dimansa was slightly startled. She looked at Chen Tao, the question you just asked? Didn't I answer you? Chen Tao raised the corners of his mouth slightly and said, I mean, the previous question. Have you ever been to the Gene Exchange Center? It's really rude, Dimansa muttered. She hesitated for a moment and said, I haven't been there. I am the leader of the group and I have to deal with a lot of things every day. I have the right to make my own decision when I go there. Where are the others? Chen Tao asked. When the others turn 20, the computer will match them, and as long as they are selected, they will receive mission orders, Dimantha said. Chen Tao nodded slightly, so that's it? Then you are willing to help us. Dimantha looked at Chen Tao, the picking team will arrive within an hour. We only have 1 hour left to clean up the thunder beasts in this orchard. Currently, only Pei Love can act. If other people encounter that kind of special beast, that is to say, except for Pei Ai who can handle some, the rest can only be done by you. Can you do it? You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. My time is running out. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 356. Can it be done? Timancha knew that Chen Tao's technology was very extraordinary, and that the mecha Chen Tao could make was very powerful. But Chen Tao had to eliminate all the thunder beasts and special beasts in this fruit forest by himself. Can he do it? Timancha had a question mark in her heart. Chen Tao looked at Timancha and said, just now I was free, I checked the number of monsters in the safety barrier, and there were a total of 59 thunder beasts and 23 special beasts left. Timancha looked more solemn, and said, there are still so many left. The monsters in this fruit forest are more than I guessed before. There is no way, Timancha said, we can only retreat. Wait until your mecha is developed, and then we can talk about it. The number is too large, which has far exceeded Timancha's expectations. Faced with so many monsters, Timancha, as the leader, can only choose to retreat for the lives of her men. Just leave it to me, Chen Tao said, no need to retreat. Timancha looked at Chen Tao, leave it to you. Chen Tao said, don't you want me to help? I said I would help, so I will definitely help with this matter. Can you do it? Timancha was stunned. She said, that's 59 thunder beasts and 23 special beasts. Can you do it? What are you going to do? Chen Tao looked at Timancha and said with a smile, it's been solved. For a moment, Timancha was stunned. What are you talking about? Solved, Timancha's voice was full of disbelief. Captain, suddenly, a voice came from the intercom. Timancha said, I'm here. That voice was Pei Ai's voice. Pei Ai's voice was full of doubt and weirdness. She said, it's strange. The thunder beasts and special beasts that were fighting with me just now all suddenly lay down. Timancha was stunned. She looked at Chen Tao in disbelief and retracted her gaze. I know. Everyone listen, Timancha said, cancel the retreat plan and continue the mission. Yes, a voice came. After Dimancha finished giving the order, she subconsciously looked at Chen Tao and said, how did you do it? It was so shocking. What happened? Dimanche couldn't understand how Chen Tao did it. He just said a word and killed all the monsters in the orchard. What kind of means is this? Dimanche was a little shocked and confused. She wanted to know what was going on. Hearing this, Chen Tao smiled and said, I can survive alone outside for so long, of course I have to have some means. Hearing this answer, Dimanche realized at once that it seemed that Chen Tao didn't intend to tell Dimanche about his means. Dimanche retracted her sight and changed the direction of advance. Turn around and continue to move forward along her previous route. Now that the retreat plan has been cancelled, it is necessary to continue to complete the next task. Although Chen Tao said that he had solved all the light beasts, Dimanche still couldn't believe it completely. She had to see it with her own eyes. She didn't want to take risks. If the picking team came in and found that there were still light beasts in the orchard, then everything would be over. Chen Tao, where are you now? Pei Ai's voice rang through the intercom beside Chen Tao's ear. Hearing this voice, Chen Tao smiled, missed me? No. No, Pei Ai's voice was a little flustered, and she said, I just asked. This was on the intercom, and this intercom was shared by the entire team. Pei Ai didn't expect Chen Tao to say such a thing on this intercom. On the other side, Dimanche, who heard this through the intercom, raised her eyebrows. Chen Tao smiled and said, I'm with your team leader now, do you want to come over? Well, I won't come over, I just asked. Pei Ai was afraid that someone would hear something, so she tried to speak more seriously. The second team was also wiped out. I am now replacing the second team to carry out the mopping up mission. I will go over after the mission is completed. Hearing this, Chen Tao said, okay. Pei Ai hummed softly. Chen Tao looked at Dimanche. Dimanche looked at both sides. After driving for a while and going deep into the orchard, she could see the corpses of the raid beasts one after another, including the corpses of special beasts. The more Dimanche looked, the more frightened she was. Dimanche had a new understanding of Chen Tao's ability. After completing the task, the two returned to the previous starting point. That is, the location where the off-road vehicles were parked. Dimanche drove the mecha onto the off-road vehicle, then got out of the mecha cabin, jumped, and landed next to Chen Tao. The mecha on Chen Tao flew away directly as it dispersed. Dimanche looked at the scene of the mecha parts flying away with the thrusters, her eyes were shining, she crossed her arms and said, it's really high-tech. Chen Tao's eyes fell on Dimanche. Dimanche had a head of soft blonde hair, which was tied up, revealing her beautiful face, high nose bridge, and thin lips. Looking down, she was wearing a black bodysuit similar to Pei Ai's, which perfectly wrapped her mature and hot figure. Dimanche's waist was very thin, and her upper body held up the fabric high. Among Chen Tao's women, only Ziking and others could compare with her. Dimanche had a pair of slender and straight legs, which were estimated to be about 1.1 meters long. With the pair of black high-heeled boots, she looked even taller and more attractive. Dimanche noticed Chen Tao's sight. She looked at Chen Tao and said, Pei Ai, can't I satisfy you? Hearing this, Chen Tao looked at Dimanche, smiled and said, you misunderstood. I just saw the beautiful scenery and couldn't help myself. Dimanche blushed slightly and said, you are really good at talking. Captain. Suddenly, a voice came. Dimanche and Chen Tao looked at the source of the voice. There were two soldiers wearing heavy mechas. One of them opened the mecha cabin and revealed his face inside. At a glance, Chen Tao found that the person who came was Enqing. It was Enqing, the captain of the vanguard team who brought Pei Ai and the others before. Enqing had short silver-white hair that reached her shoulders. She sat in the mecha cabin, looked at Dimanche, and said, I found something very strange. After you, the captain, gave the order to let us move forward, we saw many corpses of raid beasts and special beasts along the way. And Ching said, I have seen them. They have no external injuries, but they are indeed dead. It's very strange. When Dimansha heard this, she subconsciously glanced at Chen Tao, then looked at An Ching and said, I know. The same is true for me at this time, another voice came. I saw Pai, who was wearing a humanoid mecha, falling from mid-air. Dimansha nodded slightly. Pai saw this, she spread out the humanoid mecha, and then walked to Chen Tao. Chen Tao smiled, stretched out his hand, and hugged her shoulders. Pai blushed slightly, she looked at Chen Tao, wanted to say something, but she couldn't refuse Chen Tao, so she could only acquiesce. After that, people from other teams came back one after another. And the answers they got were all the same. The road was full of corpses of rat beasts and special beasts. What on earth is going on? And Ching frowned and looked at Dimonsa. Dimonsa said, I don't know either. If you want to know the answer, you can ask Chen Tao. As far as I know, it was Chen Tao who did it. As she said that, she subconsciously looked at Chen Tao. All of a sudden, everyone's eyes turned to Chen Tao. My time is running out. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 357. And Ching looked at Chen Tao and said, Did you do this? Pai also blinked and looked at Chen Tao beside him. Chen Tao gently touched Pai's shoulder. He looked at An Ching and said, Yes. There is nothing to hide about this. And Ching looked at Chen Tao curiously, How did you do it? Chen Tao looked at An Ching. He looked to the side and found that the soldiers around him were all looking at Chen Tao. Chen Tao smiled and said, This is a high-tech technology that I have mastered. I will tell you more about the techniques for using this technology. I will just tell you about the effect. Since they are interested in knowing, it would be a good idea to tell them. Chen Tao turned slightly sideways and said, Have you seen that fruit tree? Everyone looked in the direction Chen Tao was looking at the fruit trees not far away. You saw it, what's wrong? Dimantha asked. Upon hearing this, Chen Tao said slowly, Watch carefully. As Chen Tao finished speaking, the fruit tree, which was estimated to be 100 years old, disappeared. See this? Dimansha's eyes narrowed slightly, and she quickly looked at Chen Tao, What's going on? Hearing this, Chen Tao looked at Dimansha and said with a smile, As you can see, I erased that tree. In fact, Chen Tao erased all the genetic codes that made up the tree. From the outside, it looked like the tree had disappeared out of thin air. Incredible. Dimansha looked at Chen Tao, How did you do it? Chen Tao said, I said, this is a high-tech technology. As for how I did it, I am not going to explain to you. Timanza was silent for a moment and said, Then this is how you killed those light beasts and special beasts. Chen Tao said, Well, I erased their hearts. The hearts of the people around heard Chen Tao's words quickened. Does this kind of high technology still exist in the world? If what he said is true, doesn't it mean that whoever he wants to kill will have to die? Isn't this ability too terrifying? Someone started talking quietly next to him. Indeed, for them, the technology displayed by Chen Tao was completely beyond their understanding. Dimansha took a deep look at Chen Tao and said, If someone else said this, I wouldn't believe it, but with what you just showed, it seems that even if I don't believe it, it would be difficult. You have such powerful technology, if you are willing to help us, I think humans don't have to hide in the sanctuary all the time. Dimansha looked at Chen Tao. Chen Tao, on the other hand, had an indifferent look on his face, as if he didn't intend to participate. Seeing Chen Tao's expression, Dimansha could only remain silent. Captain. Suddenly, Dimansha's intercom rang. Hearing this voice, Dimansha said, Sukiran. Yukazome is also a member of the resource team and is now the leader of the picking team. Swezan is currently driving a heavy mecha to guard the surroundings of the picking team to protect their safety. Then Timanza's team will open the way. Now that Yukazome contacted Dementia, there was only one possibility. Yes, the picking team will arrive at the orchard in half an hour. How is the situation now? Do you want to go directly into the barrier to work? Yukazan said. Taimanza said, there is no danger in the orchard, just come in. Yes, Yuki Ran's voice sounded. Chen Tao looked at Pei Ai beside him and said, okay, then we have nothing to do with us here. Let's go back. How about it? Pei Ai was slightly startled. She turned her face to look at Chen Tao, and then looked at Dimansa. Dimansha looked at Pei Ai, she nodded slightly and said, since he asked you to go back, then you should go back. There is no danger in the orchard anymore. Pei Ai hesitated for a moment. She looked at Chen Tao and said, okay, I'll listen to you. It seemed that Pei Ai didn't want to leave that much. It's normal. After all, we are on a mission now. If we leave now, wouldn't that mean we gave up on the mission midway? And after the resources are collected, they still have to be transported and left. No one can guarantee whether they will be attacked by strange beasts when they transport resources to leave. If so, if anything happens to Dimansha and the others, Pei Ai will suffer for the rest of his life. But Chen Tao wanted to leave, and Pei Ai couldn't force him to stay. After all, she belonged to him. Pei Ai looked unhappy. Chen Tao smiled and raised his hand. A dark wormhole appeared next to Chen Tao. See this black round door that seems to open from the air. Everyone present was stunned, including Pei Ai. Pei Ai came back to her senses and looked at Chen Tao. Chen Tao said, let's go. With that said, Chen Tao stepped into the wormhole. Pei Ai was startled, then she hurried over and her body disappeared into the wormhole. The dark round door disappeared, looking at the disappeared round door. What's that? I don't know, is that a door? After the soldiers came to their senses, they started talking among themselves. Dimansha looked at the direction Chen Tao left, and she said slowly, is this also high technology? I don't know, except Chen Tao, no one on this planet knows what that thing was just now. Naturally, no one can answer Dimantha's question. At the same time, Chen Tao and Pei Ai appeared in a bedroom. Pei Ai looked at the dark round door behind him, which slowly closed. Pei Ai looked at the bedroom. Isn't this the bedroom in the research room? After realizing this place, Pei Ai's heartbeat quickened. What's going on? She was clearly in the orchard more than 50 kilometers away just now, but now, in the blink of an eye, she appeared in this bedroom. Pei Ai looked at Chen Tao and said, what kind of door is that? What's going on? She was a little confused. Looking at Pei Ai's puzzled face, Chen Tao smiled, raised his hand, and hugged Pei Ai horizontally in his arms. Pei Ai was startled, and realized what Chen Tao wanted to do. Two blushes flew on her face, and she said, don't be like this. Chen Tao looked at the face in front of him, which was so close, and he smiled and said, do you remember what you promised me? Pei Ai was slightly startled, her eyes trembled slightly, and she pursed her thin lips, well, I remember. Chen Tao smiled, then it's time to fulfill your promise. Pei Ai's face became even redder, and her little face was hidden in Chen Tao's arms, and she slowly closed her eyes. Seeing Pei Ai blushing, Chen Tao smiled and walked towards the bed with Pei Ai in his arms. 2 hours later, Chen Tao looked at the ceiling, turned his head slightly, and looked at Pei Ai beside him. Pei Ai lay on her side with her eyes closed, looking tired. Looking at Pei Ai's expression, Chen Tao said gently, if I don't let you stay there and continue to perform the mission, will you be angry? My time is running out. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 358. Pei Ai fluttered her eyelashes and slowly opened her steamy eyes. She slowly approached Chen Tao and rested her little head on Chen Tao's arms. I am your woman, I only obey your orders, No matter what, Pai said softly, as long as you want Pai to do it, Pai will do it. She slowly closed her eyes and snuggled into Chen Tao's arms lazily. Sensing Pai's small gesture, Chen Tao gently stroked her hair and said, "When we left, the people from the picking team were about to arrive. When the people from the picking team entered the orchard, they would collect resources. Time. It will probably take a lot of time," Chen Tao said. "The orchard is already safe, so I don't want to waste time there. Instead of wasting time inside, I would rather accompany you here and do something meaningful," Chen Tao said, looking at her moving face. The half-open eyes under Pai's eyelashes were filled with a trace of blurred moisture. "Then, shall we go back?" Pai asked cautiously. Hearing this, Chen Tao smiled and said, "Of course, I will let you go back after they have collected the resources. If you want to escort them, escort them." Pai's eyes lit up slightly, and she raised her face to look at Chen Tao. Chen Tao smiled and said, "Is this okay?" There was a hint of luster in Pai's eyes. She pursed her thin lips and hummed softly, "Okay." Seeing Pai's well-behaved appearance, Chen Tao couldn't help but feel happy. Pai rested her little head on Chen Tao's arms. She was in a happy mood and became good-behaved. The two cherished each other. After coming over for a while, Pai said softly, "What is that black door we came over just now?" Upon hearing this question, Chen Tao said, "Want to know?" Pai said, "Of course I do, it feels so magical." Just a moment after stepping into that door, we returned from the orchard to the bedroom. Is this also technology? It feels so convenient. If the sanctuary also has such technology, it won't be so troublesome to go to the orchard to collect food. Upon hearing this, Chen Tao smiled, "Unfortunately, I don't intend to hand over this technology to anyone else. However, I can tell you what that door is," Chen Tao said. "It is a micro wormhole. I used a computer to calculate the location of the micro wormhole, then opened the micro wormhole and connected it to another wormhole. Then I connected it to another wormhole. Our human body breaks down into molecules and travels through the wormhole to another wormhole assembly." Pai looked at Chen Tao with her big eyes. There was a glint in her eyes. "I don't understand, what is a micro wormhole? Can the human body be decomposed?" She looked confused. Seeing Pai's reaction, Chen Tao understood. Pai's knowledge of science and technology is too little. She has never heard of micro wormholes, let alone others. Do you want to explain in detail and give her some basic knowledge? Chen Tao slowly approached Pai and placed his forehead against Pai's forehead. Eyes facing each other. Pai's eyes were filled with luster. Chen Tao came closer and kissed her. Parted lips. Chen Tao looked at Pai's blurred eyes and said with a smile, "You don't need to know this. You just need to know that I can use this technology to take you anywhere. I'm staring at Dimanche right now. We are waiting for the collection team to collect resources. It will probably take some time. During this period, let's do something meaningful." Chen Tao looked at Pai and said with a smile. There were two blushes on Pai's cheeks under the corners of her eyes. She pursed her thin lips slightly and slowly hid her face in Chen Tao's arms. No more talking. Chen Tao took it as her acquiescence. Other side. "And Qing, tell me, what is the door that the man opened? Where does it lead to?" Dimanche leaned on the off-road vehicle and looked at the place where Chen Tao disappeared just now. And Qing on the side was standing with her hands folded on her chest, leaning against the tree trunk. She looked at the place where Chen Tao left, and said, "I don't know, but judging from what the man meant, he doesn't seem to want to continue to accompany us here mission. If he doesn't come to carry out the mission, then he can only take Pai back to the sanctuary." "Go back to the Holy Land," Dimantha said. "If you can go back to the Holy Land using that door, then why are we driving?" And Qing said, "With the technology he has, it may not be impossible." Driving is our method, and he probably won't use those technologies to help us. It's really strange. Demantia crossed her arms and said, he is too strange. It feels like the technology he possesses is not very similar to what we are familiar with. Whether it is the advanced mecha, the method of killing the Lightman, or that black door is something we can't understand. Timanza frowned slightly and said, the survivor from outside the territory, where did he get so many superb technologies? And Ching was silent. She didn't know, so naturally she couldn't answer Demantia. An idea flashed in Demantia's mind, and he remembered what Chen Tao had said to her before. She subconsciously looked up at the sky. Could it be that he came from outside? Outside, and Ching showed a hint of curiosity. What outside? Timanza looked at Ching and said, he told me that in this universe, our planet may not be the only one with humans. At that time, I thought he was talking about aliens. Looking back now, it seems that there's something strange about that sentence. And Ching's eyes lit up slightly. You mean, he is from an alien planet? Timancha frowned. I'm just guessing, but the technology he has is indeed extraordinary. Maybe, he is really from there. And Ching's eyes were shining, and she also looked up at the sky. On the outer space, there are humans who look exactly like us. Is there really such a thing? She seemed to be in a trance. This is just my guess, Timancha said. We will know when the time comes when we ask Chen Tao. Just then, a dark round door appeared in the air. Seeing the round door, Timancha and Ching looked at each other, and then looked at the door. The figures of Chen Tao and Pei Ai just appeared out of thin air in front of the round door, and the figures of the two emerged. Chen Tao looked at Timancha and Ching. He retracted his gaze and looked at Pei Ai beside him. Pei Ai saw Dimunsa and Ching. She smiled. Captain Ching, Captain Dimunsa. Dimunsa nodded slightly. Why are you back? Pei Ai said, we are still worried, so we came to help escort the resources back to the Holy Land. Dimunsa said, okay. After saying that, Dimunsa continued, Pei Ai, where did you two go just now? What is it to enter that round door? Pei Ai was slightly startled. She looked at Chen Tao. She was not sure if she could tell Dimunsa about this, so she wanted to see what Chen Tao meant. Chen Tao smiled and nodded slightly, indicating that she could tell. Pei Ai looked at Dimunsa and said, report to the captain. Behind the round door is Chen Tao's bedroom, which is the bedroom in the Holy Land Research Institute. How is it possible? Dimunsa was stunned. When she talked to Ching, she had already guessed that it was very likely to lead to the Holy Land, but now she heard with her own ears that they had crossed a distance of 40 kilometers. She still felt incredible. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. My time is running out. Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 359. Pei Ai said, I also think it's impossible, but after stepping into this round door, what I saw again at that moment was the bedroom. Dimensia's eyes trembled slightly, and she subconsciously looked at Chen Tao. Chen Tao crossed his arms, smiled, and said, this is one of the high-tech I have, but I don't want to use these technologies to help you transport things, so if you want me to use this to help you, you can give up this idea as soon as possible. Dimensia, whose thoughts were captured, pursed her lips. She did have this idea just now, if she could let. Captain, a voice came. Hearing this voice, Chen Tao looked at the source of the voice. A woman wearing a dark blue one-piece tights came out over there. This woman had long hair like ink, and her skin was as white as snow, crystal clear. Tall figure, clear curves. Shweran, how is it? Dimancha asked. Shweran bowed respectfully to Dimancha and said, the food has been collected. The abundance of food in this orchard is expected to be enough for our Holy Land to consume for 3 months. Dimanche said, "Okay, everyone get in the car. Go back to the city." Yes. Under Dimanche's order, everyone adjusted the team and began to escort the trucks full of food to the Holy Land. Pai put on the mecha, flew in the air, and patrolled. Chen Tao sat in Dimanche's off-road vehicle. Dimanche raised her face and looked at Pai flying in the air. She said through the intercom, "Pai, if you fly like this, can the energy last? This F1 mecha uses stellar energy. According to Chen Tao, as long as the stars in the galaxy where our planet is located are not destroyed, then this F1 mecha can be used indefinitely without worrying about energy consumption." Pai's voice came. Hearing this voice, Dimanche was stunned, and she subconsciously looked at Chen Tao beside her. Chen Tao crossed his arms and looked at the scenery ahead, seemingly not that interested in what was happening here. Dimanche retracted her gaze. A mecha that can be driven by unlimited energy? Isn't this too exaggerated? Dimanche swallowed her saliva and said, "Chen Tao, is this true?" Chen Tao was startled. He looked at Dimanche and said, "What?" Dimanche looked at Chen Tao and said, "The mecha you made can be used infinitely, and there is no need to consider the energy problem?" Chen Tao said, "This? Yes, that's right." Dimanche's eyes were shining, and she said, "Then, are the mechas you made for us the same as Pai's?" Chen Tao's eyebrows stretched slightly, and he said, "Well, but there are not many mechas. I will only provide you with 6. Dimanche nodded slightly. 6? It's indeed a little less, but if it can really have unlimited energy and unlimited operation, then these 6 mechas are enough to surpass the combat power of all the mechas currently owned by the Holy Land." Chen Tao looked at Dimanche and said, "I like it." He retracted his gaze. Dimanche subconsciously glanced at Chen Tao again, and she retracted her gaze. "We encountered a few thunder beasts along the way, and that was all." Almost without any obstacles, the team returned to the Holy Land. Everyone stayed on the city wall. The large trucks were also lifted onto the city wall by the lifting platform. Chen Tao noticed that there were already many people waiting on the city wall. They seemed to be responsible for unloading and transporting goods. In front of him, an old man was standing there. This man was the commander of the Holy Land, Leslie. Next to Leslie stood a woman wearing a high-tech helmet. Although her face could not be seen, her clothes and hot body showed her identity at a glance. She was the head of the law enforcement group, Jenna. Next to Jenna stood a blond man, the deputy head of the law enforcement group, Jensi. Seeing Chen Tao and others, Leslie's old face had a smile. Jenna could not see her expression clearly, and Jensi frowned slightly. "Congratulations to Captain Dimanche for completing the mission and returning with a great victory," Leslie smiled and said. Dimanche walked over, saluted Leslie, and said, "Commander, I just tried my best to do what I should do." Leslie stroked his goat beard and said, "How is the result?" Dimanche said, "The food collected this time is expected to support our consumption for 3 months, but the loss this time is not small. A total of 12 mecha warriors died and 12 mechas were lost." 12 mecha warriors? 12 mechas, Leslie looked at Dimanche. Dimanche said, "Yes, this time we encountered the kind that can penetrate the mecha and shoot the warriors in the mecha. Our 12 mecha warriors were all killed by that kind of special beast. The number of light beasts and special beasts entrenched in the fruit forest is far beyond my expectations." She looked at Leslie and said, "During the time we stayed in the Holy Land, there were significant changes outside the domain." Leslie stroked his goat beard and frowned. Chen Tao, who was watching this scene, retracted his gaze and fell on Pai beside him, admiring Pai's lines. Her figure was perfectly highlighted in her leather bodysuit. Her waist was slender, and the fabric on her upper body was lifted up, outlining a beautiful range of motion. Pei was listening to the conversation between Demansa and Leslie, and she looked at Demansa. Chen Tao saw Pei's profile from this angle. Under her narrow eyelashes were a pair of clear eyes. She was looking forward, and her serious look was very cute. Under her high nose bridge was a thin lip. Her ink-like hair was tied up, revealing her fair and slender neck. Her skin was delicate and smooth, as white as jade. Chen Tao approached Pei, raised his hand, and hugged her waist. Pei was startled. She turned her face and looked at Chen Tao. Their eyes met. Chen Tao smiled at Pei. Pei blushed slightly, retracted her gaze, and did not dare to look at this man. She looked forward, her face was red. The main credit for completing the mission this time is not actually mine. Demantia looked at the commander and said, almost all the monsters in the orchard were cleared by Chen Tao and Pei together. When Leslie heard this, he couldn't help but look at Chen Tao. The new mecha he developed has unlimited energy, and it is much harder than ours. Those special beasts can't destroy his mecha, and can only passively die, Demansa explained. Leslie looked at Chen Tao, holding his sheep's beard, looking at Chen Tao, and said, "Thank you, Mr. Chen." Chen Tao heard it, and he looked at Leslie. Leslie said, "If it weren't for your help, this mission would not be successful. Then the people of our sanctuary would starve to death. It would be a terrible disaster. My time is running out." Author, Chen Wunian. Chapter 360. Chen Tao put his arms around Pei's waist, looked at Leslie, and said, "There's no need to thank you. I just helped Pei because he wanted to do this." Leslie looked at Chen Tao, then he looked at Pei and said, "Fortunately, Sanctuary has you." Faced with Leslie's praise, Pei was a little frightened. She lowered her head slightly and said, "I just did what I should do." Leslie smiled. Chen Tao said, "It's over now. Pei and I still have things to do, so I won't accompany you." With that said, Chen Tao looked at Pei and said, "Let's go." Pei hummed, looked at Leslie and said, Commander, I'll leave first." Yes, the commander nodded. Chen Tao left with Pei. Watching Chen Tao and Pei walk away. "Demantia, you just said that the mecha used by Chen Tao has unlimited energy." At this time, Jenna's voice sounded. Commander Leslie also looked at Taimanza. "I am also very concerned about this. Our heavy mecha consumes too much energy. It takes half a month to fully charge, but it can only be used for 5 hours. There is no way to fight for a long time." Leslie said, "But you just said that the mecha used by Chen Tao uses unlimited energy." Taimanza nodded slightly. She looked at Leslie and said, "Yes, he uses an energy called stellar energy. That energy comes from stars. According to him, it is our star here. If it doesn't go out, it can be used all the time." Leslie frowned slightly, and his expression became more solemn. "Stellar energy, if this energy can be used in all aspects of the sanctuary, it will completely change the entire landscape of the sanctuary. For all of us, mankind's survival will be a huge contribution." "Yes," Demansa said, "however, it seems that he does not intend to tell us how the star's energy is used." Leslie frowned and stroked his beard, but there was nothing he could do. "I think it's better to arrest him," a voice came from the side. Leslie looked towards the source of the sound. The one who spoke was surprisingly Gensi. Gensi crossed his arms across his chest. He looked at Leslie and said, "This man hides so many secrets. For the sake of the development of all mankind, I think he can be imprisoned and then interrogated by me. You can pry his secrets out of him." Demantia crossed her arms and looked at Gensi with disdain and said, "What a great suggestion. I actually want to use forced confession to deal with a benefactor who saved the life of our sanctuary," she said with ridicule. Gensi was startled, and he frowned suddenly. "Taimensa, you." "Okay, Commander," Leslie said. Seeing the commander speaking out, Gen Si could only shut his mouth. Leslie said, every technology he possesses is unknown to us, and there are many uncertainties about how to do it with him. Moreover, he also helped us. He is the hero of this resource collection. He is ours friends, we shouldn't attack our friends. This, Commander Gensi said, I am not targeting him. It's just that he is too much. He has those technologies, but hides them selfishly, and is not even willing to share them with us. Now, when mankind encounters this situation, all mankind is a community with a shared future, but it is really unbearable for him to be like this. Gensi looked at Leslie and said, the reason why I want to do this is for the sake of the future of all mankind. I know, that's it, Leslie said. Leslie didn't bother to tell Gensiduo and walked away. Looking at Leslie's back, Gensi opened his mouth, wanting to say something, but didn't know what to say. Realizing that his image in Leslie had been affected, Gensi's face turned ugly. Seeing this, Dimanche's eyebrows slightly stretched, she took back time and said, let's go. Taimanza left with the people. Other side. Chen Tao and Pei Ai returned to the room. After Pei Ai arrived in the room, she stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window and looked at the scenery outside. Chen Tao looked at Pei Ai's enchanting figure. He smiled, approached Pei Ai, put his arm around her waist from behind, and stuck his face out from her ear. He looked at Pei Ai and said with a smile, what are you thinking about, woolen cloth? Pei Ai turned her face slightly. She looked at Chen Tao beside her and said, are you from this planet? Upon hearing this, Chen Tao was startled. Chen Tao knew that one day Pei Ai would ask this question, but Chen Tao did not expect that not long after, Pei Ai would actually start asking this question. How did she find out? Chen Tao let go of Pei Ai, and he turned her around, their eyes facing each other. Chen Tao looked at Pei Ai and said with a smile, do you think this is important? Chen Tao did not deny the question, but at the same time he did not answer her directly. Pei Ai's eyes glowed with a hint of luster, and she approached Chen Tao and snuggled into Chen Tao's arms. Well, it's not that important. Whether you are from this planet or from an alien planet, to me, they are all my men. It's just, I want to know. Pei Ai raised his face, looked at Chen Tao and said, you are my man now, at least let me know your true identity. Chen Tao looked at Pei Ai, raised his hand and gently touched Pei Ai's face. He looked into Pei Ai's eyes and said, well, I can tell you that I come from outside your planet. Pei Ai looked at Chen Tao. She didn't say anything, she just looked at Chen Tao's eyes quietly. Chen Tao put his arm around her waist, looked at the face so close in front of him, and said with a smile, any questions? Pei Ai said, are there humans on the planet you are on? Yes, Chen Tao said, yes, just like you and me, there is no difference, we are all human. Pei Ai's eyes were shining, and she said, it feels magical. I didn't believe in the existence of aliens before, thinking that it was just made up by scientists, but I didn't expect that there really are, and my man is actually one. Pei Ai showed a happy smile, looked at Chen Tao, and said, then, is your world beautiful? Chen Tao smiled and said, well, there is no doomsday in my world, and there is no virus like you said. People in my world are free and autonomous, and there is no so-called sanctuary law. Pei Ai looked at Chen Tao with her big eyes and said, that kind of planet feels that's great. Chen Tao raised his hand, held Pei Ai's hand, looked at her and smiled, if you like, I can take you there to have a look. Pei Ai retracted her gaze, leaned her little head on Chen Tao's chest, and slowly closed her eyes. I really like it, but, I was born and raised in the Holy Land. I don't want to leave here. If I want to leave, at least wait until the things here are resolved before leaving. Chen Tao looked at Pei Ai, problem, what problem? Pei Ai raised her face and looked at Chen Tao, the problem of the Holy Land, Now the resources of the Holy Land are in short supply, and the beasts outside are eyeing the Holy Land. If something goes wrong, the Holy Land may be destroyed at any time. Chen Tao looked at Pei and said, "So you want to liberate the Holy Land?" Pei looked into Chen Tao's eyes, she looked at Chen Tao seriously, and said softly, "Yes, I want to liberate the Holy Land." At the same time, outside the room, a group of law enforcers wearing light mechas were rushing towards Chen Tao.